Under the silent cloak of midnight, Serapha moved like a shadow between the ancient oaks. Her pale skin reflected the faint glow of distant stars, and her crimson eyes hunted every flicker of movement. The air smelled of damp earth and pine sap, thick with the echoes of distant howls. Each breath she took was steady, purposeful, as she traced the scent of her quarry. A pack of werewolves who dared to trespass on her lord's ancient domain. Far below on the rocky ledge, Roran crouched among jagged stones, his senses alive with primal alertness. The howl that shattered the stillness had set his heart pounding, a warning that death crept closer. He flexed his powerful claws, feeling the coarse fur ripple beneath his fingers. Every muscle in his lean, wolfish form twitched with readiness. Though the night was pitch black, his amber eyes pierced the darkness, seeking the source of danger. Serapha paused when she sensed him. She raised a slender hand, fingers curling around the hilt of her silver blade. The moonless night was her ally, permitting her to blend into gloom as easily as smoke. She took a silent step, shadow melding to form, moving with a grace that belied her centuries of existence. The faintest brush of leaf against leaf warned her that something stirred in the darkness ahead. Roran shifted, catching her faint scent, cool-blooded and a whisper of centuries. He rose to his full height, his wolfish snarl vibrating through the still night. "Show yourself," he demanded in a voice low and gravelly. His words carried both challenge and curiosity. Most vampires would have fled at his roar, but Serapha had faced worse in her long existence. Instead, she stepped into a clearing, the moonlight catching her blade in a single shimmer. Roran lunged forward with the speed of a falling star, but Serapha danced aside. Her movements were a seamless blend of beauty and lethal precision. Her blade carved through the air, a silver arc that whispered against the wind. Roran twisted, his powerful shoulders absorbing the strike's echo, but the blade did not find flesh. Instead, it severed a thick vine anchoring over hanging moss. The vine fell, revealing a hidden cave behind. They froze, locked in a moment where predator and prey became mirrored reflections. Roran's heaving chest glowed with moonlight, his jaw tense with both rage and awe. Serapha's lips curved in a knowing smile, her eyes softening at the wild strength before her. Neither moved as the wind carried the scent of damp stone from the cave's maw. A quiet invitation, perhaps, or a trap laid by shadows older than either of them. In that breath, the world felt suspended. The distant howls faded, and the forest held its breath. For a moment, vampire and werewolf stood at the crossroads where their fates would intertwine, one driven by ancient duty, the other by fierce loyalty to his pack. Beneath the moonless sky, an unspoken promise wound between them, drawing them closer to a destiny neither could yet imagine. Serapha and Roran stood at the cave's threshold, the cool air spilling out like a whispered secret. Each pause, senses alert. Roran could smell damp stone and ancient dust. Serapha inhaled the scent of old magic lingering in the air. Together, they stepped inside, their footfalls soft on the rocky floor. The cave walls were lined with crude carvings, images of twisted figures worshipping a crowned skeleton. Flickering torches revealed basins carved into the stone, stained dark where liquid had pooled long ago. Roran's heart tightened. He recognized the shapes of werewolves in the carvings, his kin offered as tribute to some forgotten power. His claws itched with anger. Serapha moved closer to the carvings, her pale face grave. She pressed her fingers to the jagged lines. "These mark the blood path," she said in a voice like velvet. "Generations of sacrifice feeding the dark throne." Roran's amber eyes narrowed. "What throne?" he asked, stepping beside her. She hesitated, then met his gaze. "King Orien," she whispered. "Once ruler of these lands undone by rebellion. Now I seek to bring him back." The name hung between them, heavy as a falling stone. Roran's breath caught. "You hunt my pack for his return." Serapha looked away, the torchlight casting shadows across her cheekbones. "I serve a greater truth," she replied softly. "Without Orien, chaos reigns. With him, order will return, though the cost is high." Rage burned in Roran's chest. His wolf form trembled at the thought of his brothers and sisters slain for a cause he could not accept. He opened his mouth to growl, but Seraphah laid a cool hand on his forearm. "Listen," she urged. "There is more you must know." Her voice carried the weight of centuries. Roran swallowed, torn between fury and curiosity. She led him deeper into the cavern. The air grew warmer, flecks of ash drifting like lost stars. At the heart of the cave they found a raised platform of black marble. Scattered around were lengths of pale hide, werewolf skins preserved in silence. Roran's breath stuttered. The skins moved faintly, alive with leftover spirit. Seraphah knelt and traced a line where crimson runes curled along the floor. "These words bind the flesh to bone," she explained. "Once activated, they will weave life back into Orion's crown." Horror and fascination warred in Roran's mind. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the pulse of his own life, aware how easily it could be taken. Seraphah rose and faced him, her eyes soft but resolute. "You have seen my truth," she said. "Now decide, will you stand against me or help me end this dark age?" The torchlight danced in her eyes, showing both hope and sorrow. Before Roran could answer, a low chant echoed through the tunnels. Voices of unseen worshippers rose and fell, carrying a promise of doom. Seraphah's blade flashed at her side. Roran's claws extended with a hiss. Together, they braced, bound by a fragile alliance and a destiny neither fully understood. Beyond the next arch, the ritual awaited, and with it, the power to remake their world in blood and shadow. Seraphah and Roran crept through a narrow tunnel, the chanting growing louder with each step. The walls glistened with moisture, and the flicker of torches revealed more carvings. Wolves kneeling before a skeletal king, arms raised in blind devotion. Roran's heart pounded, his senses on fire. He glanced at Seraphah, whose calm face belied the storm inside her. She pressed a finger to her lips, signaling him to move silently. They emerged into a cavernous chamber where hooded figures circled a stone dais. On the dais lay a tapestry of woven hide, fresh werewolf skin stretching outward like wings. At its center, a ruby amulet pulsed with red light, each beat echoing the rhythm of a living heart. Seraphah's breath caught. "That amulet anchors the ritual," she whispered. "Without it, Orion cannot rise." Roran's claws twitched. "We must destroy it," he growled, low and urgent. Seraphah nodded, but her eyes flicked toward the chanting acolytes. There were too many of them, their voices weaving a protective spell around the dais. Roran surveyed the chamber. Jagged stalactites hung overhead, and broken pillars lay scattered like dominoes. An idea sparked in his mind. He pointed to a fractured pillar, its base built around a rusted chain that dangled above the altar. "We could collapse it," he murmured. "It would break their focus." Seraphah studied the structure. "It's risky," she said softly. "If we gamble and fail, they'll drown us in blood." Roran stepped closer, taking in the pillar's lean. "We have no choice," he replied. "Every second counts." She drew her blade, its edge gleaming darkly. Together, they slunk toward the nearest support. As they neared, Roran shifted into midform, taller, faster, muscles rippling under silvery fur. Seraphah placed a steady hand on his broad shoulder. "I trust you," she said in a rare moment of softness. Roran sniffed the air, then reared back and struck the pillar's chain with his clawed foot. The metal shuddered and groaned. Seraphah lunged forward, slicing through rusty links with a swift arc of her blade. Sparks flew as steel met silver. With a final screech, the chain snapped. The pillar wobbled, then crashed down in a storm of stone. The cavern shook as dust and rock rained around them. The acolytes screamed, their chant faltering as the altar cracked. The ruby amulet tumbled free, its pulse quickening in panic. Roran sprang forward, jaws snapping shut around the pendant, severing its magical beat. Seraphah wove a counterspell, her voice rising above the chaos. Threads of pale light wound around the fallen skins, unraveling the dark magic that bound them. The temple walls trembled and the chanting died away, replaced by panicked cries. Roran crushed the amulet in his jaws, its ruby facets shattering like drops of blood on stone. As silence settled, Serapha lowered her hands, her eyes shining with triumph and relief. Roran released the crushed amulet, its fragments clinking to the floor. For a moment, neither moved, as if the world held its breath. Then Roran offered her his hand for dusting fallen rubble. She placed her slender fingers in his, their touch warm and alive. Together, they turned to the shattered days. The werewolf skins lay slack, their magic broken. Roran let out a rumbling breath. Serapha pressed close, her lips brushing his ear. "We've stalled Orient's return," she said softly. "But this is just the beginning." Roran nodded, eyes burning with fierce loyalty. Beneath the flickering torchlight, vampire and werewolf stood side by side, bound by battle and a fragile trust. The cavern doors lay ahead, opening onto a world that would never be the same. As dawn's pale light filtered through the shattered cavern entrance, Serapha and Roran emerged into a world stirring with life. Dew-laden ferns glistened under misty rays, and birdsong echoed faintly, an ironic serenade after the night's violence. Roran scanned the tree line, every sense alert for ash wolves or Aryan spectral guards. Serapha leaned on him, her pallor more pronounced in daylight. A thin trickle of blood stained her sleeve where a hidden shard had nicked her side during the altar's collapse. Roran led her to a fallen log beside a burbling creek. He dipped his hand in the cool water and gently rinsed the wound. Serapha closed her eyes as Roran tore a strip from his cloak to bind her wound. Her breath hitched at his careful touch. Wolf and vampire bound by necessity, now drawn close by shared battle and unspoken longing. "You saved me," she whispered, voice hushed and grateful. Roran's ears twitched. He met her gaze with a soft intensity. "We save each other," he replied, fingering the cloth around her side. "Without you, I would have fallen beneath their chance. Without me, you might have been overwhelmed." Their eyes held in that fragile moment, a world of regret and hope passing between them. Suddenly, a distant howl rolled over the hillside, low and ominous. Roran's hackles rose, and he eased away from Serapha, tension coiling through his limbs. "Ash wolves," he murmured, voice grave. "They'd followed us." Serapha rose, pressing a hand to her blade's hilt. "We must move before they cut off our path to the forest's edge." She stood, supporting herself with a grimace as the pain in her side flared. Together, they plunged into the undergrowth. Roran led the way, crashing through brambles, senses guiding them along a path known only to wolves. Serapha's cloak snagged on thorns, but she pressed on, trusting Roran's silent direction. Golden sunlight dappled the forest floor, but beneath the canopy shadows shifted with deadly intent. They reached a small clearing where ancient stones marked the entrance to a hidden glen. Mist curled around the stones like specters, and the air felt charged with old magic. Serapha slowed, breathing deeply as she recognized the place. "The Veilthorn Glen," she said softly. "Here, the ley lines protect us." Roran lowered his stance, ears flattened, yet relief softened his features. "Then let us rest," he said. Within the glen, thorns wove a living barrier, repelling predators. Serapha collapsed beside a mossy boulder, fatigue and pain overtaking her. Roran crouched close, vigilant as a guardian. Moments passed in silence broken only by the creek's murmur. Serapha stared at her bloodied hand. "I never thought I'd trust a werewolf," she admitted, voice trembling. "Yet here I am, alive because of you." Roran's amber eyes glowed with something fiercer than loyalty, something like devotion. "And I never thought I'd fight beside a vampire," he said. "But now, I see your heart beyond the darkness." As Serapha closed her eyes, Roran maintained his watch. Sunlight slanted through the branches, illuminating them both, wolf and vampire, bound by battle, united in purpose. Beyond the Veilthorn Glen lay a world still teetering on the edge of chaos. But within this hallowed circle, love had kindled amid blood and sacrifice. and in the hush of dawn, their fragile alliance ballooned into something neither had dared to name. As the sun climbed higher, Serapha and Roran left the safety of the Veilthorn Glen. Each step beyond its boundary felt heavier, as if the forest itself mourned their departure. Roran moved in front, his keen senses piercing the hush of midday. Serapha followed, leaning on the haft of her sword when her side ached. The wound throbbed, reminding her of the cost they had paid. Their path wound through ancient trees, roots twisting like sleeping serpents. The air grew warmer and the scent of wildflowers mingled with damp moss. Roran paused at a clearing where sunlight broke through the canopy in golden shafts. He turned back and offered Serapha a handful of fresh berries. She smiled, accepting the gift, her pale fingers brushing his fur. The contact sparked a warmth that spread through them both. "We're close to the Oracle's Grove," Roran said softly. "She lives by the silver spring beyond the waterfall." Serapha nodded, remembering stories of the Oracle's power to reveal hidden truths. "We need her guidance," she agreed. "Without it, we risk walking blind into Orion's domain." They continued in companionable silence until a sudden rustle shattered the calm. From the underbrush burst a group of ash wolves, snarling and eyes glowing with unnatural fire. Roran let out a low growl, his muscles coiling. Serapha drew her blade. Their pursuers hesitated at the edge of the clearing, sensing both wolf and vampire in an uneasy alliance. "Stand behind me," Roran instructed, his voice steady. Serapha obeyed, trusting him completely. With a mighty roar, Roran sprang forward, fur rippling like a living wave. He tore through the first ash wolf, claws and fangs meeting brittle armor of ash and ember. Serapha moved like water beside him, her blade weaving graceful but lethal arcs. Each strike was precise, slicing through brittle limbs before the creatures could retaliate. The battle was fierce but brief. The ash wolves cracked and crumbled at Roran's strength and Serapha's skill. When the last creature fell, the clearing fell silent once more. Roran's chest heaved, and Serapha wiped her blade on the grass. Neither spoke. Words felt too small against the storm they'd just weathered. "Thank you," Serapha said quietly, voice tinged with something deeper than gratitude. Roran met her gaze, amber eyes warm. "I'll protect you." He replied simply. She nodded, her heart fluttering at his promise. They hurried on, the waterfall's roar guiding them like a distant drum. Soon they stood before a sheer rock face where water plunged into a crystal pool. Mist sparkled in the sunlight, and carved into the stone above the fall was a rune of silver, marking the oracle's sacred place. Roran nudged aside a curtain of ivy, revealing a hidden path spiraling down to the spring. Serapha descended carefully, each step ringing with anticipation. Below, an old woman stood beside the pool, hair white as moonlight and eyes reflecting ancient wisdom. The oracle's voice was soft yet carried through the clearing. "You seek counsel," she said, voice echoing like wind in the trees. Roran bowed his head, and Serapha knelt beside him. "We need the path to stop Orion fully, and a way to heal her wound," Roran explained. The oracle studied them, her gaze piercing. "The ritual you broke must be undone at its source," she murmured. "But the price is binding. Wolf and vampire must share a single heart's beat." Serapha and Roran exchanged a glance, both understanding the magnitude of her words. The oracle continued, "Only then will the darkness fade, and a new dawn break for both your kind." As she spoke, the water's surface shimmered, revealing visions of fire and blood, sacrifice and unity. Serapha's hand found Roran's, their fingers entwining. Outside, the forest seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the choice that would change their world. Serapha and Roran left the oracle's spring under a sky tinted with dusk. They carried few supplies: a silver chalice, wolf's bone dust, and a vial of Serapha's own blood. Each step toward the eclipse clearing felt heavy with promise and fear. Roran's heart pounded in his chest, as if testing the idea of sharing its beat. Serapha walked beside him, cloak drawn tight, her wound now bound but still tender. They reached the ancient stone circle at the forest's heart just as the first sliver of the moon began to slide across the sun. Shadows grew long, and the air hummed with charged energy. Moss-covered stones ringed the clearing, each etched with runes that pulsed faintly in the dying light. Roran paused at the threshold, sensing the shift of magic. Serapha slipped her hand into his furred side. "We must begin before the eclipse reaches its peak," she whispered, voice soft. Together, they arranged the chalice on a flat stone altar. Roran sprinkled bone dust around its base, tracing a circle that glowed pale silver. Serapha uncorked the vial and let a few drops of her blood fall into the cup. The liquid shimmered like liquid night. Roran felt a tremor in his claws. This was no mere ritual, but a binding of their very souls. As the moon covered more of the sun, a hush fell. Wind stilled, birdsong vanished, and the forest seemed to press close. Serapha lifted the chalice and offered it to Roran. He looked at the red pool, then back at her, amber eyes reflecting both devotion and fear. He knelt and drank deeply, the cold blood coursing through him with electric warmth. Beneath the cloak of his wolf form, his heart slowed against its usual fierce pace. Serapha watched him and then knelt beside, pressing her fingers to his furred chest. Roran placed his hand on her wrist so that his wolfish heartbeat thrummed against her skin. She closed her eyes and let her heart slow to match his. The moment their pulses aligned, a soft glow rose from the chalice and spread through the circle, weaving a thread of light between them. The eclipse reached totality. Sunlight vanished, and a ring of fire crowned the sky. At that instant, Serapha felt Roran's wolf spirit entwine with her vampire soul. Warmth and vitality surged through her veins. Roran felt his wild fury tempered by her calm strength. They held each other's gaze, understanding without words that their lives were forever joined. But a tremor shook the stones. From the forest's edges, shadowed shapes pressed in, ash wolves drawn by the ritual's power. They glowed with ember eyes and howled in fury. The bond between Serapha and Roran flared in response, a living shield of light. Serapha gripped her blade and Roran's form shifted, muscles rippling under fur mixed with pale skin. As the first ash wolf lunged, the circle's light flared, sending it sprawling back. Serapha and Roran stood united, their hearts beating as one, ready to defend the magic they had forged. Beyond the ring of fire in the sky, their world trembled, and a new era was about to begin. As the ring of fire faded from the sky, Serapha and Roran stood firm within the stone circle's glow. The air hummed with the echo of the eclipse's magic, and their joined heartbeat pulsed like a drumbeat in the clearing. Around them, ash wolves advanced, each step cracking twigs and stones beneath embered paws. Their snarls filled the night, hungry for the power that had bound vampire and werewolf together. Roran roared, a deep sound that shook his broad shoulders. He sprang forward, his claws cutting arcs of silver light through the nearest wolf's ash-gray hide. Serapha followed, her blade flashing like a shard of midnight. Together, they moved as one, Roran's strength and speed paired with Serapha's precision and ancient spells. An ash wolf leaped, jaws snapping at Serapha's throat. She ducked beneath its maw and twisted, driving her blade into the creature's side. It collapsed in a cloud of ash and sparks. Roran caught the fallen wolf's spirit before it fled, swallowing its fading howl to strengthen their bond. The circle's light flared at each spirit claimed, weaving a shield against the darkness pressing in. More wolves circled, eyes glowing like distant embers. Serapha reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a small vial of moonlit dust. With a whispered word, she scattered it in a wide arc. The dust caught the faint starlight, forming a barrier of swirling motes that forced the wolves back. Roran used the moment to gather his full wolf form, first standing on end, muscles coiled like springs. Now he growled, voice low and fierce. Serapha nodded, stepping beside him. They raised their joined hands, the chalice's empty light weaving between their hearts and fingertips. From the circle rose a ribbon of pure silver, arcing outward like a bowstring. With a sudden release, the ribbon snapped toward the ash wolves, binding them in threads of living moonlight. The wolves howled in agony as the light constricted, their ash-crusted forms dissolving into motes of dust that drifted skyward. The barrier held firm, downing every attacker until only silence remained. Serapha and Roran panted, the magic's residue glimmering around them. Their bond shone bright, proof of what they had become. But victory's edge tasted bitter. Beyond the fading stone circle, a deep tremor rippled through the forest. The ground cracked, sending birds into frenzied flight. Serapha's eyes widened. "Orion," she whispered. Roran's posture stiffened. He sniffed the air, detecting a presence colder than death itself. From the rift in the earth rose a pale figure, clad in ancient armor that glowed with faint, ghostly light. King Orion stood reborn, crown of bone gleaming, eyes empty of mercy. Behind him the forest groaned, shadows reaching like skeletal hands. His lips curved in a cruel smile. "You think your bond can stop me?" His voice rang like distant thunder. Serapha and Roran exchanged a glance, their joined heartbeats steadied with resolve. Together, Roran rumbled. Serapha lifted her blade, its edge catching the moon's borrowed light. "We end this," she vowed. Orion laughed, a sound that cracked the air. The clash of immortal wills was about to begin. As the ghostly king advanced, vampire and werewolf braced, bound by love and unbreakable spirit. The fate of their world balanced on the edge of their blades, and on the single heartbeat they now shared. As Orion stepped forward, the air grew cold with ancient power. His ghostly armor shimmered, and the ground trembled beneath his weight. Serapha and Roran stood side by side, hearts bound by the ritual's promise. Their joined heartbeat echoed in the clearing, a steady drum that met Orion's hollow roar. Mist curled around the stones as the Ghost King raised his gauntleted hand, summoning shards of spectral bone like arrowheads. The final battle was upon them. Roran lunged first, his claws carving through the phantom shards with a furious swipe. Each movement was wild grace, fur and muscle flowing like wind through trees. Serapha followed, her blade tracing silver arcs that cut through Orion's summoned spears. Together they pressed forward, a living tide of strength and skill. But Orion's hollow laughter rang out, and from his chest burst a wave of cold shadow that threw them both back. They crashed against mossy stones, breath ragged, wounds running cold fire where magic bit at their flesh. Yet as they struggled to rise, their joined heartbeat pulsed brighter, a living light against the darkness. Serapha reached for Roran, grasping his furred wrist. Roran met her gaze, amber eyes shining with devotion. Without a word, they stood once more, their bond aflame. Orion gathered his power for a final strike, pale bone spikes twisting toward them like twisted roots. Serapha raised her blade and Roran leaped, and they met the attack as one. At the moment of impact, Serapha called out the binding spell, her voice low and sure. Roran roared, adding his wolf spirit to her words. A ribbon of moonlight burst from their joined hands, wrapping around Orion's form. The bone spike splintered, and the Ghost King's scream echoed like thunder through the forest. The moonlight ribbon tightened, unraveling Orion's dark magic. His armor cracked, bone splinters falling away as shadow bowled from his form. The ground beneath him glowed, and with a final gasp, Orion's spirit shattered into motes of pale ash. The echo of his reign faded, leaving only the soft hiss of wind through leaves. The clearing fell silent, broken only by the steady beat of one heart. Serapha sank to her knees, the ritual strain draining from her limbs. Roran knelt beside her, his body still trembling with lingering power. Gently he nudged her into his arms. As twilight softened into dawn, their shared heartbeats slowed to a gentle rhythm. In that golden hour, vampire and werewolf felt the weight of their journey lift, replaced by a warmth deeper than magic. Together they rose and walked beyond the stone circle, leaving behind the ashes of a fallen king. Sunlight filtered through the trees, and birds returned to their songs. With each step their bond held them close, a promise of hope and unity. In the years to come, tales would be told of the vampire and the werewolf, whose love brought an end to darkness. But for now, they walked hand in hand into a world reborn, where two hearts beat as one beneath the rising sun.